Welcome to Olympian Water Testing, giving you the best in water analysis. Today we are looking at lead and some interesting information, sources of lead, what a blood lead reference value is, the effects on children, how adults are exposed to lead, and even some information that you may need to know so you can avoid lead poisoning and you can make sure that it's not in your water. So first, we know lead is a naturally occurring metal abundantly found throughout the earth, has been used in a wide variety of products. That includes gasoline, paint, plumbing pipes, and that's how it gets into the water by leaching particles from deteriorating pipes, ceramics, solders, batteries, and even some cosmetics. Now, there's no safe amount of lead, and lead is hazardous to our health. Due to health concerns in 1973, the federal government began to phase out lead in gasoline, eliminated by 1996, and the United States government banned the manufacture of lead-based paint in 1978, and in 1986, the government restricted the lead content of solders, faucets, pipes, and similar materials. Despite progress in reducing lead exposure in the United States, elevated blood levels is still an issue for children. So yes, the Safe Water Drinking Act did help. Getting rid of old pipes helps, and even being aware of the issue helps, but that doesn't mean the problem's over. So lead exposure remains a significant public health concern because of persistent lead hazards in the environment, and it's a serious problem that affects children globally, according to a study published by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF. In 2020, the study is first to describe the magnitude of global lead poisoning. Up to 800 million children have blood levels at 5 micrograms per deciliter. Nearly half of the children live in South Asia. Now, you might be thinking, well, how's that affect specifically where I'm at? Researchers estimate that half of the U.S. population, more than 170 million people, were exposed to harmful leads in their early childhood. So this is something that is still a big problem. Lead exposure is also associated with IQ loss, and that's even for which small deficits can have a meaningful adverse effect on people's lives and society. So, what are some primary sources of lead today? Old paint dust. Despite the ban, lead-based paint is still found in older homes and buildings. The paint may chip and then turn into dust. Contaminated soil. Old lead-based paint flaking off the outside of buildings can mix with soil before the elimination of lead in gasoline. Lead from car exhaust mixed with soil near the roads, and it's still there. Contaminated drinking water. Water from lakes, rivers, wells is not common source of lead, but it still is a source. And like contamination in drinking water usually comes from distribution or plumbing lines that leach lead. And the only way to know if lead is in drinking water is to have the water tested. How much lead is harmful? No blood level is safe. While the EPA and different regulatory agencies say there's a certain amount of parts per billion or per million, it's still not safe at any capacity. How does lead get into the body? How's it measured? It can get in your body by consuming contaminated water, food, or from breathing fumes that contain lead, and children under the age of 6 years old are at increased risk for lead exposure due to the rapid rate of growth and their tendency to place toys and other objects in their mouths. Now, what is a blood lead reference value? So the CDC has been involved in defining criteria for interpreting blood lead levels in children for more than 40 years. In 2012, the CDC introduced the blood lead reference, BLRV, to identify children with higher levels of lead in their blood compared to most children, and is simply the value at which a child has more lead in their blood than most children. 97.5% of children 1 to 5 years old. Initially, the value in children was 5 micrograms. In 2021, it was updated from 5 to 3.5. And that's still not safe. And they estimate that in the U.S., 97.5% of children 1 to 5 years old now have a blood level lead lower than 3.5. But it should be 0. Because why? What are the effects of lead in children? Exposure to lead can have a lot of developmental effects, and it can have health effects such as diminished IQs, academic achievement, increased behavioral problems, attention-related behaviors. If it gets worse, it can have also ramifications such as organ failure or death. Now, how are adults exposed to lead? So most adults with elevated lead levels are exposed to it at work, and a greater chance for lead exposure is found in people who work in occupations related to mining, ironwork, welding, construction, including building renovation, remodeling, smelting, shooting ranges, manufacture and disposal of car batteries, automobile radiation repair, manufacture of pottery and glass. And we can see the blood lead level here for children. Adults, the effects it can have: decreased academic achievement, IQ, specific cognitive measures, Adults decrease kidney function, maternal blood lead association, and blood levels below 10. We have delayed puberty, reduced postnatal growth, decreased IQ, increased blood pressure, risk of hypertension, and increased incidence of essential tremors. And what can you do to prevent it? Well, it's preventable. Eliminating all lead exposure is the best course of action. If you live in an older home, check with your local health department. Monitor recalled consumer products and check out the National Institute, the CDC, for occupational safety and health. If you're an employer for workers, jobs may have lead exposure and how workers can avoid lead exposure. You can also read the guidance on the CDC's lead poisoning prevention. So with all of this information, it's good that there's different ways to prevent it and that there is a higher amount of children who do not have a high level of lead, but it should be 0. That's why it's always a good idea to periodically test your water for any level of lead.